Mr. Johnson, I understand you're going soon to Africa again.
Yes, we're leaving
Can't you
again
need
next
anybody?
week. Well, we need them, and we're taking 5 with us this time, but of course, we can't take any more. You see, all our men are trained men, understand the sound cameras, understand the whole art of photography. And you see, it's the first time we ever took anyone with us. Did you make the colors? Yes, we're going to get colors. We're going to get everything. Yeah. Well, Mrs. Johnson,
Mrs. Johnson, how do you get along with the natives?
Why, I speak their language, which is Swahili, and I really like the African natives. We've always found them very loyal.
You have?
Well, how about the food, Mrs. Johnson? I suppose you get a lot of wild game out there, don't you?
Oh, yes, we have many varieties of partridge, guinea hen, and venison, and all kinds of delicious meats.
Oh, you have? What a country, and no butcher bill.
All righty, folks, let's go. Now, instead of trying to answer all your questions, we will take you across the world and attempt to show you what happened and explain as we go along. Now, if you'll just take your seats, don't get in front of the projector.
Darling, you're going to run 3 reels or 5?
I'm going to run 9.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to show all the South Seas and Africa, and show the lands.
In Tanganyika?
Yes.
Oh, that's
betcha.
great. That'll be wonderful.
Yeah, that's going to be fine. While many of our most thrilling experiences have happened in Africa, other unforgettable days were spent in the South Pacific Islands. They are beautiful islands, but in some of the groups, the savages are still as cannibalistic as they were thousands of years ago. And it may interest you to know that on the map, the South Pacific covers 1/7 of the entire Earth's surface. Now, we first went down to Australia, starting here at San Francisco, going to Hawaii, then down to Samoa, and across to Sydney, Australia. Then we went up to the Solomon Islands. And here in the Solomons, at Tulagi, the seat of government, we were able to obtain about 100 soldiers through the courtesy of the resident government officials. These soldiers went along with us as guards. It would have been suicide to go without such protection.
Yes, and it was almost suicide going with them.
I'll say it was. Now, Osie, if you will go turn out the lights.
Yes, dear.
And perhaps if you turn on the radio, perhaps the music will lull the people while I'm showing the pictures. Here is a part of the standing army of the Solomons. We have just received word that our friend, Mr. Bell, who trained these men, was killed and eaten here only a few months ago. And we know of several other people who have been killed since then. I believe it will be at least 100 years before the Solomon Islands are entirely civilized, and perhaps not then. When we first arrived here, O.C., naturally just coming out of civilization, didn't think very much of these savages. Of course, I had seen them before, and I knew what to expect. I knew that they were cannibals, and I knew that they were headhunters. At the same time, I had sort of a feeling of children. They're childlike and really happy at times, although, of course, they are as cannibalistic as any people in the world. They have all kinds of peculiar ornaments in their noses and their ears, and some of them show that they've been in fights, although the cannibal is really never a hard fighter. He's a coward. Now, while we were here, we made arrangements with Mr. Markham, a trader, to use his schooner for trips into the outlying parts of the group. Now, the woman that you see in the picture, she's not a convict, although she is serving a life sentence. That's my wife, that's Osie. Well, we had a wonderful time sailing through these islands. After about 200 miles from Tulagi, we came to a small group that is known as the Langa Langa Lagoon. Here, there are about 100 manufactured islands. I think they're the most interesting islands I've ever seen because they are composed of people who have been run off the larger islands in fights And because they had no place else to go, they would go out on the reefs and pick up stones and corals and shells and manufacture new islands. None of these islands are very large. Most generally, you can walk around them in 10 or 15 minutes. And the people here live their entire lives on coconuts and fish, never tasting anything else, unless it might be that after a few years they become friendly with the people on the mainland again. And then, of course, in that case, they would be allowed to go ashore and trade, because the mainland people naturally want fish. And the people who live on the mainland, naturally, they can't go out on the salt water, or the people on the artificial islands would kill them. So sometimes they do form sort of a truce. Here's a boy getting coconuts for his lunch, perhaps. Notice the starfish in the bottom. Hear how clear the water is? These boys, when they go in after the starfish for Osie, of course, Osie, she wanted to bring all of these things back with her. Why, they never go in head first. They always go in feet first, and they've got to be very careful the way they pick up the starfish, because if they're not careful, the tentacle will close on their hands and form a very ugly, painful wound. Now, most of the fish that these people eat are very tiny, so small that they're much smaller than whitebait. Millions and millions and millions of them can be seen in these canoes. And when the fish are eaten, they're dried, they're not cooked. They're placed in bags, and the bags are placed along the edge of the island. See them here on this picture? And I'll tell you, no one wants to go along the windward side of this island after the fish have been placed up there. Now, from the artificial islands, we sailed on to the coast of Maleta. I think this was one of the happiest times of our South Sea Island experiences, as we sailed up this coast of this savage island. We then went ashore and made a permanent camp. But before going ashore, we would see smoke arising all along the coast from the villages, telling one another that we were coming. Here's, you see, a head house and also a canoe house in one. You see, they keep all the skulls of their enemies. The canoes that these people use are the best I have seen in the South Pacific. They are inlaid with mother of pearl, and they are really very staunch vessels, although perhaps this would not look to be very staunch to you, but these people will sometimes, picture shows a real war canoe. You know, sometimes you get used to seeing pictures of canoes with savages, and people call them war canoes when they're not. But this picture actually does show a real war canoe.